starting this series called Paper Walls. And here's how I'd like to start, if you don't mind. Just stand up for a moment, and I'd like us to read a verse of scripture that comes from the book of Hebrews, if you don't mind. It should be up on the screen. It says this from Hebrews 12. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily entangles us. One more time. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily entangles us. Thanks. Have a seat. I believe that you would agree with me on this, that there are some things that are very worth carrying forward in our lives. Things that are good to bring from one season to the next, from 1 year to the next. Good friends, good habits, good attitudes, stuff like that. Great to carry with us. But I think that you'd also agree with me that there are some things that we should leave behind. There are some things that are just not worth carrying from one season to the next, from 1 year to the next, from one relationship to the next. God forbid, from one decade to the next. So for the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about one of those things that we should leave behind. And that one thing that we should all make a practice of leaving behind is excuses. Say that word with me. Excuses. Excuses are like paper walls that from a distance they look like real walls. They look like real obstacles. From a distance they look impenetrable. They look like we really don't have any choice but just to allow these walls to impair our hopes. In fact, from a distance, a paper wall, an excuse, looks like a real reason, looks like an actual reason. For example, there is a reason that I could not play college basketball. And it is not because the scouts and the coaches were idiots. And it's not because they were racist against 5'11" Irish kids. Okay? That's an excuse. The truth is, I was not good enough. I just was not good enough. Now, when we push ourselves just a little bit and we get honest with ourselves, we discover that our reasons most of the time are not good reasons. They're really just excuses. So excuses get passed off as reasons, and excuses easily become what I call becauses. Becauses. All of us have some becauses that we habitually hide behind when certain things come up. Like someone says, hey, why don't you get started on, hey, because I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time. Or why haven't you, well, Bob was supposed to do it. Or why do you always, well, that's because I thought that's what you wanted. Or why'd you just quit? Well, because I didn't have the right tools. Well, hey, why don't you just tell him? Because he always flies off the handle. Why don't you just tell her? Because I don't want to deal with that, that's for sure. Or why did you buy a Renault Lacar? Because I trusted the legendary French automotive industry, that's why. Because. We've all got becauses and we pass them off as reasons. Matter of fact, when we talk about these excuses, when we're talking about other people, it kind of highlights this. Because what do we say when we see somebody else doing this? We say, that's just an excuse. They're just making up excuses. In other words, you don't have any real reasons. You're just passing these off as reasons. And we usually can see right through it. Because. And we're thinking, just quit making excuses, would you please? You're trying to pass them off as real, but I see what's going on here. That's a paper wall, and you're trying to convince me it's actually a real wall, that it's actually a real obstacle. And you know what's funny about this? We see this so easily in our kids, don't we? It's so easy to see. So easy to see in our grandkids. So easy for our parents to see it in us when we were little. And we can see it pretty easily in our employees. We can see it in the people that are around us that we care about. And we see a friend might be doing it. And we think, that's not a reason. That's an excuse. I mean, I'll admit, when I was growing up, I feel like I'd have to come up for a reason because I got busted doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing. And so maybe there are times when you feel like you need to come up with a reason because something in your life is not going so well, and maybe you're getting called on it, and you feel the pressure, I got to come up with something here. So easy to see in other people. Some of you are thinking right now, boy, I hope he's paying attention to this. Or I hope I can get my kids to watch this one. Wonder what's going to cost me this time. Cost me $20 last time. In other words, we can spot an excuse in somebody else a mile away. We can't see it from 1 foot away in the mirror. So what we say is the reason is But what we almost never say is, well, my excuse is, but that would be honest, wouldn't it? So I thought, as we get this series started, it would be good to have just a moment of honesty. So we never say this, but I think it would be honest. So let's all say this out loud. My excuse is, out loud, my excuse is, that kind of feels pretty good. It's therapeutic in some way. Wouldn't you love to hear your spouse say that? My excuse is, or him or her or your kids say, you go to your kids and say, why haven't you done your homework? Well, Dad, my excuse is, well, I would probably give him $1 because that would just sound so refreshing. What if we just quit disguising our excuses as reasons? Is it possible? Is it possible? Are you at least willing to consider that some of our reasons, some of our becauses, some of our excuses are really just paper walls? They're just something that you've created. And the thing is, you have a reason why you have created that paper wall. There's something that we really don't want to face. More than likely. Maybe yours are constructed of something that someone once told you. Maybe a name someone called you one time. Maybe a label that you got earlier on in life. And so now anytime that topic or that challenge comes up, you're like, no, wait, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. So is it possible that you've invented some reasons to defend certain behaviors? Maybe some reactions to defend some overreactions that you have too often? Is it possible that you've created a paper wall for why you procrastinate about certain things? Why you neglect certain things? Why you avoid certain things? Just this past week, Bonnie and I checked out an adventure park that's really close to where we just moved. And Bonnie was really motivated. She did all the homework and she got the Groupon so it would be affordable. And Bonnie was really motivated to do this. Me, not as much, I would say, not quite as much. And I'll admit, there were days when I would jump all over this. Those days happened to be before the gray hair that has just recently come upon me. And just recently, I mean in the last 25 years. Because I recently turned 50. Much more recently, 61. But I digress. It was a two-part adventure park. It's got two parts to it. One part is a high ropes course where you're climbing across beams and walking across boards and ropes 50 feet up in the air. It's a little freaky. And at the very end, to get off the course, it's really pretty easy. All you do is step up to the end of a platform and jump off this 55-foot platform to get down. You're on a harness, but that doesn't really register at that point in time. You're just looking 55 feet down. All you can see is you're looking down 5 stories. There's also an aqua course there where you're climbing up and across these giant obstacles while being sprayed with a fire hose. It's like being a contestant on the TV show Wipeout, if you remember that. Slightly less violent than that. But not surprisingly, both courses were really filled with kids and teenagers who weigh nothing and have effortless total body control. Now me, I'm just a few years removed from feeling that way all the time. Bonnie is wiry and strong as a mule, and when it comes to giving in to aging, she also is as stubborn as a mule, it turns out. So she was all in on this thing. Now I, on the other hand, as I said, was less than enthusiastic. I had some pretty good I had some pretty good reasons, is what I meant to say. So I kind of flew them up the flagpole to see if she would salute. So I said, Bonnie, I would love to, but it's too expensive. She said, I got a Groupon, it's cheap. I said, okay, but Bonnie, I'd love to. It's probably too crowded. She's like, really? On a Monday afternoon? All right. Oh, well, Bonnie, I would love to, but I'm 61. Me too. Get over it. Bonnie, I would love to, but I just had lunch and I'm supposed to wait 10 hours before I go in the water. Even I didn't buy that one. Bonnie, I would love to do this, but in this economy, I was scraping the bottom of the excuse barrel by that time. Truth was, I was a little intimidated. The truth was, I was uncomfortable, and here's why. I've been an athlete all my life, so whenever it's game time, I tend to thrive. I'm pretty secure in my athletic abilities. I rarely look inept when it comes to that kind of stuff. And so that's just who I am. But I was looking at this 55-foot high ropes course, and then the aqua course, the obstacle course, and I could see the writing on the wall pretty quickly and pretty clearly. And I didn't want to look dumb or weak or old, and that's what was going on inside of me, if I'm really admitting it. It was a paper wall. Now, This is huge. This is huge. You know what is at the root of our excuses? All of us. You know what's at the root of our excuses? An excuse is blaming something internal on something external. It's blaming something internal on something external. It's so insidious. It's something that's wrong inside of me, but it's so hard to look in the mirror and admit it. So I decide it's not me, it's something out there. And the moment I decide it's something out there, I begin constructing a wall. And I think that I'm protecting myself, but I'm actually harming myself. I'm hemming myself in and keeping myself out of opportunities, maybe out of better situations, because of something I just won't admit to myself. I can't do it because. Watch, it's not my thing. I don't really care about that. And we go on and on. The truth is, I'm afraid to try. But I'm not going to say I'm afraid to try. I'm going to say, you know what, that's just not my thing. I just don't really care about that all that much. And after a while, that mentality becomes like a reality. Again, it is just an excuse. It's a paper wall. It's a because, and I hide behind that sometimes, and so do you. We don't accept that from our children. We don't accept it from our employees. We don't accept it from people around us that we care about. Why in the world do we accept it from the person in the mirror? And maybe most importantly, why are we talking about this in church? Is it a spiritual thing, or doesn't seem like it? Here's why. This is really, really important. Here it is. There is a relationship between your ability to follow Jesus and your willingness to push through your paper walls. There's a relationship between your ability to follow Jesus and your willingness to push through your paper walls. Your willingness to acknowledge that your reasons are really just excuses. They're becauses, and they're just excuses. And it's important because our excuses compete for lordship of our lives. An excuse can become your master. It can become your boss, because you know what excuses do? They tell you what you can't do. Amen. You can't do this. You shouldn't try that. You shouldn't apologize. Don't do what you're not comfortable doing. What if you embarrass yourself? And if you're a Christian, you could spend the rest of your life singing about King Jesus, but serving King Excuse. And I want to be fair. There are reasons why you make things up. There's reasons why we put something out in front of us to protect us. There's reasons behind why we make excuses. There's a reason why inside of us that causes me to blame something outside for something that's wrong on the inside. And I get it. Maybe I would construct the same paper wall if I were in your situation. There's no judgment here. But I'm telling you, all of us, we don't want a paper wall to be the boss of us. You don't want to get to the end of your life and look back and think, oh my gosh, I spent my whole life behind this stupid wall that was nothing other than what I propped up to try to protect myself. It's ridiculous. So, in the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, the author is trying to get some Jewish Christians to not use the difficult time that they're going through as an excuse to stop following Jesus. Because they were following Jesus, but they hit some bumps in the road. It got difficult. Some bad things were going on. So he's saying, please, folks, don't give up following Jesus because of these very real difficult things. It's not a good reason. You're making up an excuse here. And in the midst of this letter, he gives a great piece of advice, and it's great for anybody, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not. He says, I know what's going on. I know you have a reason for your reasons, but this is what he says in verses 1 and 2. He says, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily entangles us. We read that together just a few minutes ago. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily entangles us. In other words, he's saying, as you're moving forward, throw off all those things that hinder you. It's a sports analogy, and I love that. He says, rid yourself of every encumbrance, anything that tries to trip you up, anything that gets in the way of, or keeps you from God's very, very best. Just do away with it. Another translation of this verse says, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. Now that word sin there is a landmine. It's a landmine. A lot of us heard that bandied about as maybe you grew up in the church like I did, at least in my teen years. The people use that word and the phrase to try to get us to behave, to keep our noses clean, to stay on the straight and narrow. You know, if you follow the life of Jesus through the Gospels, he never really boils the sin thing down to an action list. He never says, okay, guys, 5 things you cannot do. Here's what they are. It's really simple. Don't do these things and you're good to go. You know what sin was for Jesus? Sin was anything that hurt someone made in the image of God, including you, which makes sense because if God so loves the world and he loves the people of this world, then he doesn't want the people of this world to get hurt, and he certainly doesn't want them hurting each other. Like a good parent, when you see somebody do something that hurts one of your kids, or maybe you see one of your kids do something to a brother or sister that hurts them, you get upset not because they broke a rule, you're upset because one of your kids got hurt, whether or not there was a rule about the particular thing. And when you inflict hurt upon yourself, from God's perspective, the God who loves you, that's a sin. Lying is a sin. Lying is a sin because you know what lying does? Lying breaks a relationship. You can't have a real relationship with someone who lies to you all the time. Anything that breaks a relationship breaks the heart of God because God is all about relationship. It's stated multiple times throughout the Bible that liars are not part of the kingdom of God. You're never more like Satan than when you're lying. It's harmful. And that includes lying to yourself. It includes lying to yourself. Lying is a sin because it hurts you. So an excuse, looking from this perspective, an excuse is really just a lie that we tell ourselves. I can't. I'm not good enough. I tried and it doesn't work. It's not my fault. Somebody else's fault. An excuse is a lie that we tell to the person in the mirror. So when the author of Hebrews says these words, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily entangles us. He's saying, I want you to get rid of anything that's an impediment to you running your race. In fact, you may know this. You may feel this. Some have lied to yourself so much at some point in time, you're going to have to apologize to yourself. Let us lay aside every weight, especially the sin that so easily entangles us. And he goes on, keeps going on in this verse. He says, and let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. Back to the running thing. He's saying, you're going to be free to run once you shed these shackles. Now, if you're a Christian, you believe that God has a plan for your life. That's your race. That's the race that you're running. God has a will for your life, a will for your family, a call on you. Maybe he wants you to do something on purpose and live your life with purpose and end up looking back on your life and say, my life mattered. My life mattered. Now here's the great and the challenging part, what the author says next. Because basically what he's saying is, you need to quit focusing on yourself. You need to quit focusing on yourself. We think, wait a minute, that's what our whole society is all about, focusing on ourselves. I just got to focus on me for a while. It's not you, it's me. I'm working on myself right now. That's what I'm doing right now. I got to take some time and do some self-care, self. We hear this stuff all the time. I say we've honed it to an art form today. Self-help, self-improvement, self-fulfillment, self. You know what it's created? All this focus on self has created the most miserable, navel-gazing, self-obsessed culture in the history of the world. And you know what else? It causes depression. Depression is off the charts right now. It's at an all-time high. Self-focus hurts you. It hurts you. So what does the author say? Here's what he says in verse 2. Let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. We do this, look at these words, we do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus. By keeping our eyes on Jesus. Another translation says, fixing our eyes on Jesus. Looking away from excuses, away from the fears, away from the lack of opportunity or the lack of resources or whatever it's been. And then fixing our gaze, fixing our eyes upon Jesus. Becoming Jesus-focused, not self-focused. And when you choose to really follow Jesus, you'll eventually stop manufacturing excuses. If you really decide to follow Jesus, he'll reveal those to you and he'll help you with that, and you'll eventually have to stop lying to the people around you and lying to yourself. And we will stop hiding behind the becauses, behind the paper walls. And when you follow Jesus, He's going to lead you through all of that nonsense and help you pull down those paper walls. And what was so scary before, what shut you down before, no longer will. It'll become a new opportunity in the future. No more shrinking back, making excuses. Wouldn't you love to be free from that? Let me just close by reiterating this thought from a moment ago. There is a relationship between your ability to follow Jesus and your willingness to push through those paper walls that you've set up. So let's shut down the excuse factory. Let's move beyond our paper walls. And in part 2, next week, we're going to talk about how to move beyond those excuses that hold you back. Because there's freedom on the other side, and that's what God wants for you.